But why not live like it's the 50s? Why not really do it for real? Well, after college, I had the 57 Devon Sports Racer. That was my cool vintage race car. The only other car I had was a Porsche 944. You know, it was a small town, and I would get bored. Of course, you want different adventures and stuff. And I thought to myself, you know, if I'm gonna have a 57 race car, I should have a period correct tow vehicle. That's what I need. So let's cut to the chase. I sold my perfectly good Porsche 944 to drive to a, not the best neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio, that I somehow got my mother to go with me to drive with to buy a ratty old 1953 Ford pickup truck that somebody shoved a 460 big block in without doing anything to the brakes or suspension whatsoever. And it just about had milk crates for seats. But I could afford it, and I thought I could restore it and make it into something for what I got out of my 944 at the time. Now this truck wasn't bad, didn't really have much rust. The paint looked like it was put on with a roller 40 years ago and was cracking, but it was thick enough, I'm like, I could probably wet sand that and make it shiny again. And it came with a Mustang 2 independent front suspension kit, so that's like something, right? And it's got the 460 big block with like a C4 automatic tranny, and I'm like, you know, I can do something with this. So I test drove it around the block, and keep in mind, I live like 2 hours away from Cleveland, okay? Test drove it around the block, brakes weren't that good. They were the original drums. And I don't know when this thing's been driven last, okay? The fuel's definitely bad. But no problem, I'm gonna magically get this home with my mother following me in a new Volkswagen Beetle. And I remember driving it, and the first cool thing was, and I kind of had the moment, I'm like, I sold my perfectly good Porsche to buy this truck. Wait, am I nuts? And I need to just keep going with this. The greatest thing ever was, I get to a gas station, right? And I just got this truck. And I'm kind of excited. I'm putting gas in. I'm like, it's got to have fresh gas for the ride home. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I hear, oh man, Sanford and Son. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, all right. I'm like, glad you like it, man. I just sold my Porsche to get this. He's like, man, you sold your Porsche to buy this? He's like, all right. I think I sell my Porsche to buy this too if I had one. So I immediately made a friend. This guy, he thought I was all right. Get the gas, get on the highway. I'm on the turnpike on this truck that I haven't driven yet. There's no seat belts. I don't even remember what the seat was. The brakes, by the way, the only reason the brakes work was because they were so rusty that like the rust would grab. But there was like no effective anything going on here. It had the big pedal travel, you know what I mean? And it's automatic, so it's not like I have the whole manual slowdown thing really working in my favor much here. And it's geared like for drag racing. It's just all wrong, and it's smoke because it's like varnish gas in this thing. Get to a rest stop. I think it vapor locked, but I got it going again. I'm still driving this thing. What was priceless about this 2.5 hour drive home, which should have been an hour and a half, the rust in the brakes lasted just enough to give me effective braking effort until I got home. But about 10 miles before I got home, my only effective way to stop anymore was full brakes, like standing on it for what was left, and downshift at the point you can with the automatic, hoping it would do it, watching making somewhere to go. But you couldn't actually stop because it's automatic. So at the last moment, you could stick it in neutral, but there was nothing left of the brakes to do it. So I just had to decide, wheel it and park at the last moment to go, and that was my technique for stopping by the time I got home. So I took it to a mechanic buddy's place. And I don't even remember how I got talked into this, but he's like, yeah, we should box the frame and put on all suspension and do all this. I'm like, really? I just wanted to get this thing going and maybe like tow my car around and have fun this summer. So I got roped into a way bigger project, but it was fun. We took the whole front end off, boxed it, did the suspension, but oh my God, I had no daily driver. What was I thinking? You know what I mean? And I didn't have any more money than just what I sold the 944 for, which wasn't a lot. So I had to be very scrappy. You know what I mean? I'm like, I need a better seat for this thing. I got an old like back seat out of some GMC pickup truck, put that in it. I'm like, hey, I got an old Momo Prototipo steering wheel that's ratty. I'll just use some deer skin I got from the Heritage Festival and sew that up myself to fix it for a steering wheel. I mean, it was really like the junkyard special. And it was a crazy summer, and I had to bum rides to get there to work on it. And anyway, the biggest thing I wanted to do with this was tow my vintage race car to a race, okay? And the race coming up was Watkins Glen. That's an 8-hour drive away, New York, right? And I'd never been to Watkins Glen before. So I'm getting closer. I get the truck like done in terms of running and the frame and all, and I drive it out to the pole barn where I built my old stuff. And so now it's time to start wet sanding that paint to try to make it shiny, which I did. But I realized a lot of it's crappy, so I came up with a cool paint scheme with like black scallops in the front, kind of like a 1930s air racer, like a Williams or a GB or something like that. And it looked pretty good. Did this cool graphic. It's like Casey's Speed Shop, so it looks super 50s. It was really good. And the truck had some patina, so I wasn't worried about it. I finally finished it literally the night before I had to leave for Watkins Glen. My test of the truck driving, or even being able to like reasonably be able to pull a trailer with my race car on the back, was driving the 5 miles from where the pole bar was to my parents' house where I left the next morning. I'm like, hey, it worked so far. And next morning, and cell phones were garbage back then. And believe it or not, I had an actual map, a paper map. So I'm off to Watkins Glen. Beautiful sunny day, great. But you know, it's straight pipes with 2 glass packs that don't do squat. Probably had 411 gears in the back. With this 460 big block, I don't know how I made it to gas station, for one thing. And I've got an actual road map, like from the olden days, so I'd get lost half the time. And on the way to Watkins Glen, and I was going deaf because it was so loud. This 460's roaring. I didn't have a tack. I don't know, it was probably $4,000 or just, it was idiotic. But it was fun. And I made it to Watkins Glen, finally. And I just felt like $1,000,000. But it starts to get into like foothill mountains. And I remember like going up this hill with this truck, like, whoa, towing my race car. This is everything I own with this truck that the brakes and the I changed them. But oh my God, made it. You know, Watkins Glen with the Devon, I raced it. It was a great adventure in itself. But that truck was such a grand adventure, and people loved it. They're like, you look like you just came out of a movie. And for me, that was cool, because like I'm racing, but why not live like it's the 50s? Why not really do it for real? And I remember the guy that drives a Corvette. He's got like, legendary motor cars in Canada or something, had some TV show, and he was advertising a magazine. He's like, can we tow our Corvette to a vintage race on an open trailer with a 60s truck? I'm like, poser, I just did it with a 50s truck and like $6,000 budget. And you have a TV show? I remember going up to registration. The registration one was really nice. Her name was Kim, and she was nice to me because I was like the youngest person around. And she goes, "Oh my God, you look like you just came out of a movie," And I wore, with the Devon, I wore the open face helmet and goggles and stuff. So everything I had looked period correct, and my toolbox and all the stuff I brought is just in the back of the truck. And I paddock, and everybody's got semi-rigs and stuff. I'm like, there's my truck, there's my trailer, and I've got, I don't know, I think I have like a bistro umbrella or some ridiculous thing. And I'm like, I hope when I come back from the race with my car, people haven't taken my little paddock space. And I remember I made friends with a guy with a 911. He's like, hey, you got grease? I'm like, yeah, sure do. But people loved it because, I think all the guys at Vintage Race, it's already an ordeal and they want some comfort and all. But they admired, like, literally the only young person that wasn't there with their father doing it on their own that actually embraced the vintage racing culture so much to go to the extent to do that and race a cool car and do it well and finish, that made a lot of friends. And a lot of people remember that forever. That's why I fell in love with vintage racing. That's why it was such a great thing. It was time to go home, the hour drive, and it was just as hard to get fuel. I was just as deaf. And when I finally got home, it was a beautiful day, and I remember it was the most insane, serene quiet. I was no longer at the racetrack or going deaf from this old truck. It was really fun because the other thing was I was still living in the small town, and it was pretty boring. So, your buddies, you go with your crew and you go bar hopping, dive bar, and man, a 53 Ford pickup truck that wasn't too nice with a big block in it was the best bar hopping vehicle ever. And I remember Keith, a buddy of mine I ride bicycles with, and this one girl I was friends with, she's riding in the middle, he's here, bench seat. We're going from one place to the other, and we're like, dude, we got to go to an alley or something, because Keith knew if you just stomp on it and downshift, it sounded like you're watching swamp buggy racing, like a 1990 SPM or something. So we go in an alley and just go, whoop, and it was the most ridiculous, absurd vehicle in every way. But, for that summer and building it, it was a great experience, learning how to weld and put the suspension on and do that. And it was just another great adventure, living beyond your years and being very silly in an old truck.